Hey folks, and welcome to Hey Adora, your Queer She-Ra podcast. I'm Force Captain Meff, they, them.
And I am Princess Jenny, she, her.
And I'm Head Sorceress Shawn, she, they.
Who's that extra voice in our room?
What? Well, we have a special guest star today for a very special episode. We're starting a really cool discussion on race in SPOP with our friend Head Sorceress Shawn. Give you guys a little bit about who our Head Sorceress is. Head Sorceress Shawn is a playwright, an author, and a huge nerd. She's the creator and the facilitator of the Queer Women's Torah workshop. Her debut collection of story poems, The Red Door, was a semi-finalist for the Cave Canem Poetry Prize and will soon be published by Ben Yehuda Press. Her nonfiction writing about living at the intersection of Black and Jewish has been featured in Tablet Magazine and Tribe-Herald. She is currently developing Project Tzimtzum, inspired by the theater and role-playing games. Project Tzimtzum aims to create spaces for playing, dreaming, learning, and making within the Jewish world and beyond.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
So today, we are not discussing an episode. We have finished our first season, and we are diving into a super important topic that is very dear to all of our hearts, which is SPOP and race. Because we haven't talked about race at all yet throughout the season. And it's not because it's not there.
No, it's definitely there.
And so we're just opening a dialogue today.
Yeah,
this is by no means going to be comprehensive.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we're here to learn and we're here to listen.
Yes. So, Shawn, do you have a starting point in mind where you'd like to jump in?
Oh, wow. I don't want to say I want to set things up, but I want to make clear to the audience that this is not going to be a racism 101 kind of discussion where, you know, well, what is white privilege and what is a microaggression? It's like, no, we're not going to do that. There's plenty of resources for that elsewhere.
Right.
What I'm here to do, and what hopefully we'll be able to do as the episode goes on, is that I'm interested in exploring how does race impact this or that thing, which is a much more interesting and, you know, open kind of conversation.
Totally, yeah.
You know, and it's like, I'm not really interested in this, you know, trying to adjudicate whether, well, is it racist to do blackface? It's like, yes. So,
and also those yes or no questions don't lead anywhere.
Yeah, right. They don't lead anywhere, and they don't get people to get introspective or to even make up their own minds about how they feel things, because, you know, I'm just one person. People may experience some, you know, a lot of people may experience something very differently from me, and that's all valid. So, you know, just making space for that is, you know, is I think important.
Absolutely.
So I guess from here, one of the things I really wanted to talk about was like the, speaking of the show itself, was the racial paradox of Etheria.
Oh, I love this.
All right.
Okay, but here is the racial paradox. Etheria has many people. You know, it's populated by many people with a multitude of skin colors and physical features that do not exist in our world.
Right.
You know how whenever a topic about racism comes up, people say, I don't care if you're red, I don't care if you're green, blue, or purple. There are literal green, blue, and purple people in this world.
Yes.
Right.
And there are lizard people, and there are people with horns and people with tails. There are people with exoskeletons. It runs the gamut.
Right.
And so Etheria is functionally race-free. Functionally, race shouldn't exist in Etheria.
Right. In theory.
In theory. But the society that made the show is definitely not race-free. I mean, this is an American show with American creators aimed at an American audience. And you can't escape that. And if you're, you know, attuned to these things, you're put in this weird paradoxical space. Because the show presents Etheria as race blind. But, you know, the American creative team has biases and blind spots and unquestioned assumptions. And it does show up in the work. And the same is true of the fandom. So, that's what I wrote down, I guess.
Yeah. That reminds me a lot. I was just sick this whole past week, and I've been mindlessly rewatching old reruns of Star Trek The Next Generation. Because, you know, it's something from my childhood that I haven't watched in so long that it's like practically new again. And it's very obvious. And, you know, watching it as an adult now, it's so much more, even though I'm not saying I don't still love this show, it's a product of its time, just like everything, and a product of its culture. So even though they're presenting this incredibly evolved utopian view of the future of the human race being no war, no poverty, no racism, but it's still so clearly situated in a very white cultural headspace. Like everything about the show is incredibly white.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they're saying that, but they're trying to imagine a future where we have gotten past all these issues, but we are not there. We are creating this cultural product in this time and in this space. And in some ways, that is so much more reflective of how we view these things than just an average sitcom would be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, agreed. And I think something that both SPOP and, you know, Star Trek and every fucking show I can think of, right?
Any sci-fi series could sub in for that.
Yeah. Star Trek comes from a white heterosexual male perspective too.
Oh yeah.
Like there is the white heterosexual male perspective, whereas SPOP comes from the perspective of ostensibly, like, you know, at the time there was an all women writing, you know, all women creative team, mostly white creative team, and, you know, not particularly heterosexual. That being said, the diversity of, you know, racial voice in the writing room, not so much. And that I totally see, you know, Shawn, what you're saying about, like, that would absolutely, you know, it's the fertile earth where the, you know, where this grows from, right? Like,
yes, we have a group of white people trying to imagine a race-blind, race utopia society.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't have any actual diversity of voices in the room to imagine or shape what that would look like.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like these, like, the certain one old thing, one new thing that I was trying to get into. Like when you talk about Star Trek. Okay, the new Wheel of Time thing on Amazon Prime, and the weird gender stuff that I'm trying.
I haven't seen that.
I haven't seen it either, and I really want to.
But so the something old, something new, you're saying that the Wheel of Time thing is sort of subbing into that same space?
Like for me, kind of. It's not, I guess, necessarily as a Black person, because I don't know. I haven't read the books. I tried. It was too much of a slog to get through the first 10 pages. So I just like, nope. And I noped right out of there. Now the TV show is here. And I did play the role-playing game when Wizards of the Coast put it out all those years ago.
So I don't know anything about it, and I'm assuming there's audience members who also don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's hard to... It's like this... I can't remember everything. It's just, I just don't have a...
So what I know about the conceit of it is essentially like, it was pitched to me, shown to me, and please, anybody, if I'm wrong, write in, that it is like a women-centric society where only women have access to magic, but it's written by men.
Got it.
Yeah, that seems to sum it up.
Yeah.
Got
like,
it. That speaks volumes.
Yeah. So I could see how, like, you know, it was written by Robert Jordan, and it was written...
I think the first book came out in 1990 or something like that.
Yeah. So like you know, it's once again like, you know, it's from that fertile earth. So that's the old, but I don't have any exposure to the new. So when you're saying like old to the new, like what does the new feel like? Like what's going on with that?
I don't know. I keep falling asleep on it because the main character is this bland white dude, and I can't stand him.
So why are you putting yourself through it at all?
I want to be like conversant in it at least.
Yeah. Fair.
And the glimpses I've seen of these amazing, complex, badass women of color, and then it's like back to the bland white lead. It's like,
yeah.
I'm like, why couldn't the show be about her?
Right.
That's what I'm thinking the whole time. But yeah, and there's another thing. I'm currently reading through Dune by Frank Herbert.
Oh, Dune. That one's rich.
Yes. And it's one of those, again, this was written in 1965, I think. So this is the 60s. And the basic idea is that it's far future interstellar feudalism.
All right.
And this major house, the emperor of this galactic empire, sends this major house / rival house to this desert planet where water is so precious that people reuse things like spit. And their whole thing is like they have to harvest this thing called the spice melange, which powers their intergalactic travel. So they're ostensibly given control over this vital resource. But of course, there's political machinations. The literal phrase in the book is plans within plans within plans. So there's a lot of complex political stuff going on. And it touches on things like religion and prophecy and whatnot. So yeah, I'm about halfway through. Yeah. But there is a David Lynch movie, if you really want to look at it, that involves Sting and
oh, yo, but okay,
those
but
weird panties.
Okay, but like seriously, there's definitely like I definitely know people that like watched that movie when they were very young and got really specific like kinks because of Sting's outfit, like which is ridiculous. Yeah.
I haven't seen it. I would love to see a picture of Sting's outfit.
We can definitely post a picture of Sting. He's
Let's
wearing,
do
like,
that.
a weird like loincloth diaper thing, and he fights like with a knife.
Oh, that doesn't sound that sexy to me. I mean, it's fine. I'm just curious.
I mean, he's like a good looking dude.
Oh yeah, I know. I can imagine plenty of people getting kinky for Sting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kinky for Sting.
Yeah, and again,
no doubt.
It's like, and I'm reading this and I'm like, trying to keep in mind, this is a dude writing in the 60s, a white dude writing in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the stuff that we pay attention to in the representation of like people of color and whatnot, it's, how should we say, it comes off as a little tone deaf.
Oh, yeah.
But yet, in the text itself, there's not, it's kind of weird. You ever seen or read a work where the work itself was probably beyond where the author was, consciousness-wise?
Yeah, I think I understand that.
Yeah. So it's like, it's more forward thinking than people would assume for work written in the 60s.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it doesn't show its age quite as much.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. But kind of it does kind of segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about.
Awesome.
Which is like, speaking of Dune, which was way more diverse than people assume it was. Like the world itself, way more brown people and black people than people thought there were. The question that I like wrote down here is, why does Etheria seem or feel so white?
Right.
Because again, literal blue, green, and purple people. And most of the named
black people.
Yeah, and black people. And most of the named humanoids in Etheria are visibly black or brown. A lot of them are ethnically or racially ambiguous or blatantly fantastical. Mm-hmm. But I think, was it you, Jenny, or someone else who said that Etheria is kind of white? Or someone else brought up Etheria being kind of white.
I don't know if it was me. I have certainly thought that it's obvious culturally that all of the writers are white.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the characters of color aren't fully fledged characters or in anything like that.
Yeah.
And the thing I was thinking about was like, Etheria is effectively a monoculture.
Right.
There's no significant cultural distinctions at all. Like, everybody speaks standard American English with no accent. There are no substantial differences in the way people live or how the environment shapes their lives. All their differences are purely cosmetic. It's literally skin deep.
Yeah.
So it comes off as kind of generic, and which means that everyone acts like suburban white people. So and the social norms are they're very waspy. I mean, there's an actual prom, and it's like that is such a distinctively, I don't want to say white America, because that's an American thing. They have proms in black neighborhoods too. But like the prominence that it takes, is distinctly waspy.
Sure, and like the texts that it was pulling from are very I mean, it was pulling from John Hughes movies, right? Like some of the whitest movies you'll ever see, and Jane Austen novels.
That's right.
So and like these are very Eurocentric and white American centric texts that are presented in kind of like American culture as cultural classics. Like Jane Austen is literally one of the classics. John Hughes movies often make like 100 best movies of all time, like understood to be cultural touchstones, but they are cultural touchstones that are representative of very particular kinds of whiteness.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. The universal experience on Etheria is drawn from very white sources.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we can compare Etheria to, say, Wakanda.
Yes. Oh, I love this.
Now, Wakanda is physically much smaller than Etheria. It's a small country in Eastern Africa.
Yes, it's not a planet.
No, it's not a planet. It's a small country in Eastern Africa. And everybody's black. But each of those peoples who live there, they're very distinct. Like the different tribes that live there, like the Panther tribe, the River tribe, the Border tribe, the Jabari, the Dora Milaje, and so on and so forth. It's like, and you see them like visually, they're visually very distinct. And they're culturally very distinct. Like the Jabari do not behave the same way as like the Border tribe or the Panther tribe. And it's like...
It's not a monoculture. It has very clear cultural differences.
It is not a monoculture at all. Yeah, very, very obvious. And it's like, and yes, everybody's literally Black. It's certainly not like a generic watered down version of urban Black American culture. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the question I want to put to everyone else is like, what do you think is the effect of having Etheria be this monoculture that draws from a very specific white American perspective? Like, what's the effect on the work itself and the representation of race?
I feel like it definitely reflects what you were saying earlier. It feels white, and it feels I love the idea of it being a monoculture, because we do see, you're right, when we go to, Elberon, or we go to the Kingdom of Snows, or we go to, Plumeria, yes, they all do have these particular kind of like cultural understandings, but you're right, they are very cosmetic. Like, there's still the princesses, and there's still the She-Ra, and these aren't like unifying cultural touchstones.
They all have the same culture. They don't have any trouble relating to each other across cultural lines.
Exactly.
There are no real cultural distinctions that ever make any of them feel out of place in one area versus a different area of Etheria.
Except for maybe needing a coat, or like having to like hippies.
Listen, the kale chips.
Yo,
I mean, Jenny and I do love our party kale, The
party kale is...
But aside from maybe, I'm losing points right now. What's the desert where they find Gina Davis? The Crimson Waste.
The Crimson Waste. The desert. The desert where they find Gina Davis.
Aside from the Crimson Waste, there are no real cultural distinctions that would make any one Etherian feel out of place anywhere else in Etheria other than where they are from.
Well, and the Horde.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Yeah. I figured we're going to get to that. Yeah.
But those are two really specific, like the Horde, as we are a fully spoiled podcast and we're looking at this all at once, we know that the Horde came from space, and then they assimilated Etherians into their society. And then the Crimson Waste, I think, is the only naturally occurring part of Etheria that has cultural differences from the rest. It just occurred to me. I don't have an agenda on where I'm going with this point.
And they're criminalized.
That's right. That's a good point.
And then there's the fact that, like, Horde Prime and his clones, they're literally a bunch of white dudes.
They're all the same white dude over and over and over and over, which is the most terrifying thing of all.
And Horde Prime's a white dude with dreads.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's why you hate him.
That's why you hate him, exactly.
He's like, oh.
And he has 3 eyes on one side for no reason. Yeah. That's just... unnecessary
flair. Is his voice actor Black?
Yes.
Is his voice actor Black, or am I thinking of something else? Okay.
Keston John is Black, yeah. And he played Cheety's best friend on The Good Place.
Cheety.
I know, Cheety.
God bless.
I love The Good Place.
Or Cheety. I would not want to put Cheety in this environment.
No, he would absolutely melt down and have an ulcer.
Oh God, he would.
Yes.
Anyway. Back to Etheria. There was one article that you sent us to read. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about that?
I have the post. I've just pulled up the post I made. First of all, let me describe the characters I'm talking about.
Awesome.
These are female characters of color in 2 different shows that are distinctly not nice. We have Regina Mills, who was the evil queen in Disney Snow White, who was portrayed by Lana Parrilla, who is a Latina actress, Puerto Rican from Brooklyn.
In the show Once Upon a Time, though.
Right, ABC's Once Upon a Time. Now, Azula is a character in Avatar: The Last Airbender. She's the princess of the Fire Nation and a prodigious firebender and like a genius of a military strategist.
Yep.
She's the girl with all the gifts.
Yeah.
Is this how I would describe her? But she has a mean streak.
Slightly understated, but yes.
Yeah. The post I wrote about these 2 characters is, Regina, Azula, and Fana's inability to recognize trauma as trauma in women and girls of color. Mm-hmm. And what I said was I started getting an icky feeling based on the ways people were just diagnosing them with personality disorders and kind of ignoring the role their environment played in shaping who they are. Because what both of these characters have in common is that they were trapped and isolated in toxic environments when they were at their most vulnerable, like since they were children. And often fandom tended to gloss over all that to focus on how maladjusted they are. And there's some surface level acknowledgement that something bad happened to them, but there's no real acknowledgement of the gravity of what they were dealing with.
They're just bad people, basically.
Yeah.
And like exacerbating all that is the fact that both of these characters are powerful and aggressive in a way that deviates from what's demanded of women and people of color by patriarchy and whiteness. And let's say heteronormativity, because the queer coding is heavy with both of them.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Azul's girls, you know. What is it, the episode, The Beach. The Beach, thank you. Yeah, the beach episode.
Yes.
Where, like, the guys hit on her and she's just like, it's kind of played off comedy-like, but it's like, she does not give a fuck about these dudes.
She doesn't even understand that they're hitting on her or why.
She doesn't understand why dudes.
What's happening.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
Like,
and all of her focus is on her female best friend.
Yeah,
It's her
exactly.
female best friend.
Yeah.
Who's in a very, I don't know how they snuck this past the censors kind of outfit.
Yeah.
But okay.
And also, don't a lot of people ship Regina and
Emma Swan? Yes, they do.
Yes.
Swan Queen is the I've never seen a fem/ship take off like that.
Right. So they both have a lot of queer implications, and they're both very powerful women of color who don't behave and who are, portrayed as aggressive.
Right. And again, in both of them, like in both fandoms, it was kind of rampant. They get tacked on with evil or crazy.
Which is one of the classic lesbian tropes also.
Yeah.
Even before you add race into it.
Yeah. And so, and it's like, okay, fictional characters is one thing, but then it's like, you know how fiction can help us learn like how to empathize with people who are different from us. And it's like, and then you look at what happens to queer women of color in the real world.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, so this is where we get the thing where doctors don't think that Black people feel pain as intensely as white people. Or that, things that I'm not going to discuss at length here that happen to other girls and women happen to Black girls and women.
Exactly.
I'm going to drop the name R. Kelly and leave it at that.
Yep.
There's, not even in that sense, but it's like that women and girls of color welcome that treatment or well, she can take it kind of thing.
Right. Or they're impervious to it somehow.
Yeah, or they're impervious to it.
Yep.
And it goes back, and this stuff is really deep because it goes all the way back to like even slavery, where they thought that Black women were not as attached to their children. So selling them to who knows where, is not that devastating.
Right. Shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. It's just like, taking a dog's puppies away from them. That was something like that.
All these methods of dehumanization, basically.
Yeah, they're completely dehumanized because they don't behave. Even though, all the research says that aggression is a trauma response. That, that like, wait a minute, let's look at the environment they were raised in. You have one person who was on screen, physically abused magically. And it's clearly, in the way she responds, makes it clear this has happened many, many times. Somehow she's supposed to be, well adjusted as a result of this, with no support, no community, no help at all. And when she lashes out at the world, it's seen as a reflection of who she is rather than a reflection of what's done to her. So, yeah.
So wait, are we talking about Catra now too?
I know, I was going to say, do we need to even say that all of this relates heavily to Catra?
And how a lot of, like, in fandom, like, Catra is coded in a lot of places as a woman of color. Like, I guess I kind of want to know, like, how we can apply this to Catra, because there's
so many ways in which she is shown as animalistic. And regardless of the fact of how horribly she was abused, even though we've seen the evidence of it, that, she is evil, she is bad. Right.
Yeah. And you see evidence of that. And it's sort of like, on the one hand, you want to be like, yay, representation. But on the other hand, it's like, oh, crap.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like, okay, do we need more media that portrays women of color as animalistic? Or, less rational? Because I think, and I think even the fandom, I think about some people really, and I don't necessarily think they mean anything by it because, they have their cat girl thing, really lean into the cat girl thing. And it can be it can leave a bad taste in my mouth. When I see it, because despite all this evidence that captures a three-dimensional character, that she's not just this, that her Catgirl appearance notwithstanding, she's a complex and nuanced and fully fleshed out person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's very obvious, like the environmental factors that shaped who she is. In fandom, you said that pattern still emerges, where it's kind of like, well, yeah, she was abused, but
right.
Or yeah, Shadow Weaver was awful, but, and it's like, no, y'all,
but
it's
what?
like it's like with any other character. Okay, I'm going to bring up another fandom, and you're probably going to roll your eyes.
Okay.
And I apologize in advance.
Let's hear
Star Wars and Kylo Ren.
Star Wars and what?
I cannot stand Kylo Ren, but that's
I'm gonna have to take a seat on the sidelines for this one.
The villain of the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
More or less. We're gonna ignore that third movie. We're gonna ignore that.
Yes, please.
Okay. You remember? Okay, the original trilogy of Star Wars. Farm boy Luke Skywalker joins the rebellion against the evil galactic empire to follow in his father's footsteps so he can be a Jedi, aka Space Wizard with a laser sword.
AKA Space Wizard?
Space Wizard with the laser sword.
Bitchin'. Yes.
That is going to be the name of my next album, by the way.
Space Wizard.
With a laser sword.
Love it.
Love it.
He becomes a Space Wizard with the laser sword, discovers that the mailed fist of the galactic empire is his father.
His father.
Who fell to the dark side.
Right.
Went from hero to villain.
Right.
And started choking people with his mind.
Right. And his evil presence is very clearly voiced by a black actor.
Yeah. But James Earl Jones is awesome in this role. He's fantastic. He's fantastic.
But it's James Earl Jones.
No. I mean, I love James Earl Jones. And he's wonderful. But I'm saying, like, it's not a black and white situation where we're saying, well, this representation is bad and therefore the whole thing is trash. Right. It's just, you have to take notice of the way these portrayals of good and bad are shaped.
Yep.
Right. We're going to ignore that part, that pale guy underneath.
I know, right?
Who doesn't look like he sounds like that.
He looks like the bad guy from Bad Girls, the episode of Buffy.
Yeah, he totally
Season
does.
Faith, where Buffy and Faith stumble upon the giant baddie in the hot tub.
By the way, folks, if you are playing the Hey Dora drinking game, which is take a drink of soda every single time Jenny or I bring up either Buffy or Buffy Season Faith, this is when you would take a drink.
That's a fun game.
Yeah.
That is a fun game.
Okay, and so there's that going on. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed Luke Skywalker saving the universe by bringing his father back to the light. Vader dies, and the sequel trilogy picks up 30 years later, roughly. So in the sequel trilogy, the new villain is a man who calls himself Kylo Ren, who is Darth Vader's grandson, and thus the son of Han Solo and Leia Organa. Like in the original series, Han Solo was a smuggler who acted like a jerk, but had a heart of gold.
And he had a great outfit, too.
Yeah, he's really good with the blaster.
He's really good with the blaster. Yep.
And he shot first.
He's sort of the morally gray bad guy with a heart of gold type of situation.
He's not even bad. He's bad at being bad.
He's roguish. Yeah.
He's roguish. That's a much better word.
Yeah. He's a scoundrel. That's the word.
It's a scoundrel. Yeah.
There we go.
So in theory, as someone who doesn't know the text, the son of Han Solo and Leia, whatever her official last name is, should be white because they're both white.
Yeah. And Adam Driver plays him. So
yeah,
he's white.
That checks out. Is white.
And he's a total Vader fanboy. And the sequel trilogy has many issues with the writing and storytelling, so a lot of basic things are really not clear. So his whole thing was to finish what Vader started. I have no idea what he means by that. So he's the bad guy. He is, imagine and I hate to bring this up because this is kind of a national trauma wound that I'm going to bring up, but imagine one of those neo-fascist Columbine guys.
Yep. Yeah.
With telekinesis, mind control, and a laser sword.
Yeah.
That's pretty
and
scary.
Rage issues up the wazoo.
Yeah, he sucks ass.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah, he's like he is a villain for the 21st century.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like if they leaned into, we need a whole other podcast for my complaints about this and how they didn't lean into the white male rage element.
Yeah.
But, and I'm saying this is a guy who murdered his own father when his father was just wanted to bring him home. He was definitely party to the kidnapping and brainwashing of countless people to turn them into stormtroopers. He was also, he didn't pull the trigger, but he knew about the plan, didn't do anything to stop it, and watched it happen when the new evil empire called the First Order blew up several planets. Okay, in the original Star Wars trilogy, the Death Star could destroy one planet. Starkiller Base destroyed several.
It's a lot of destruction.
That's a lot of genocide.
Yeah. Fair amount of genocide.
You know, he pretty much definitely crossed the moral event horizon.
Yeah.
As of that film. It's like bringing him back from that will be very difficult.
Yeah. Worse than Thanos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least on level with Thanos.
Right. The female lead, Rey, he captures her and tries to invade her mind. And he is completely horrible to his subordinates, you know, and it's like, I'm trying to look for redeeming quality here, and I can't find it because it's just everything about him is like this huge, raging, egotistical entitlement, and it's like, ugh.
It sounds like a realistic, scary white guy to me.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he is.
And he's just, ugh.
Mm-hmm.
And fandom fawns over this dude like you won't believe.
Really?
Yes, and they're like,
that's gross.
He deserves redemption, all of this shit, and it's like, but you're not going to extend this to like Azula or Catra, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Literal teenagers.
He's
like 30.
Yeah.
Oh, and on top of that, they whoopify him.
They whoopify him?
Yes, they whoopify him. And whoopifying, for those listening who aren't familiar, is when you take a character and completely turn them into this marshmallow of a person version of themselves.
Oh, like Whoopi.
It's like, it's not necessarily a good thing. It's like you scrub away all their rough edges. You soften all their flaws. It's
an idealized version.
Yeah.
That glosses over all the realities of the flaws.
Yeah. It's like they turn him to this soft boy type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he was a sweet, sensitive boy until Snoke got him.
Yeah, the wounded, angry boy. You know, if only, you know, he's the wounded bad boy, right? If only somebody was just there to love him, like
Zuko.
Meanwhile, but Zuko had reason.
Zuko earns his redemption.
Yeah, Zuko sought redemption,
of course, and he really, really worked for it, and he, you know, didn't carry out these horrific genocidal acts.
And he's 16.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's 16. Yeah.
He's not 30.
He's not 30.
And the thing is, they do that and then make Finn the person kidnapped from his family, who, you know, a family he doesn't even know. It's like, gee, why did you just kick me in the intergenerational trauma of slavery? Why don't you? Mm-hmm. You know, take it from his family, had his, whatever original name he has, we'll never know it, and give it a number instead of a name. And brainwashed his entire childhood to follow orders from the First Order, to kill without mercy. Mm-hmm. And he's the one they vilify.
Mm-hmm. And I assume he's not white.
No, he's not.
Finn is played by John Boyega.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Definitely not white.
Definitely not white.
Okay.
Definitely not white.
Yeah. So, you know, these are some pretty clear, broad sweeping paint strokes that emerge.
Yeah. Right. And so, like, to kind of segue, and it's like, I know it's a lot. We haven't specifically talked about She-Ra yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah, hopefully people can see some of these parallels already.
Yeah, so you can already see it kind of happening with Catra.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Where it's like, and you have a combination of factors going on here. It's like, how old is Catra canon? Like, how old is Catra in the show?
I think she starts at 17 or 18 and goes to 20 or 21. The show goes over the course of 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yep.
Late teens to early adulthood.
Late teens to early adulthood, yeah.
Okay. A kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then you have the confluence of all the same things that we're seeing here. You're having this young person in this toxic environment, clearly traumatized.
Mm-hmm. Constantly abused.
constantly abused and not really given options, isolated and not given options, and no real positive adult influences. And again, and there's something that happens too, where it's like, okay, she's treated as older than she is.
Yes.
And more culpable than she is.
Yes.
And her trauma is is minimized in favor of Adora in a way. Where it's like when people look at how Adora acts, they clearly understand it's a reaction to trauma. Whereas with Catra, it's a result of something rotten inside her or something malfunctioning inside of her.
Right.
And not, wait a minute, this is a direct result of trauma. And I don't want to say even more than, I don't want it to be like, well, her trauma was worse. I'm not saying that. But it's kind of interesting the way that Adora's trauma is taken more seriously.
Yeah. And I think it might be important to qualify at this point that we're not necessarily, these are not universally agreed upon perceptions, because they are perceptions. And nobody can ever say that any perception is universal.
Yes.
Because, of course, I never perceived Catra that way. But I know that I don't stand for the entire pop culture consciousness and awareness of, these dynamics.
Right.
I feel like there are things within the text that don't lean towards that. That being said, everybody pulls what they want from the text. And I've seen a lot of this for Catra.
Yeah, I've certainly seen it in the fandom, and that's why it's important to talk about it.
Agreed.
Yeah. And then, of course, they do that thing where it's like, it's not about race.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's just, she's toxic. And it's like, shut up.
It's the idea that, the bad egg, the rotten seed.
Yeah,
right.
She's toxic and abusive, right? And,
for no reason.
Yeah, for no reason.
Or else they put it side by side and they say, well, Adora didn't become evil because she was abused. And it's like, well, their abuse was very different.
Right.
They were abused side by side in different ways that were highly manipulative. And everyone's responses to trauma is different. Fight or flight. Everyone knows fight or flight. They're both equally valid responses to trauma.
Or freeze.
Yeah.
Yeah, and oftentimes Catra does freeze.
Yep.
Okay, granted, Shadow Weaver was magically manipulating her to do that, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it's not your free will, the embodiment of that response is happening.
Yeah, and I mean, Catra does disassociate multiple times.
Yes, that's
throughout the series.
Yeah. We've seen that.
I rewatched Once Upon a Time in the Waste a couple of days ago, mostly because Catra in a leather jacket and a sword is sexy.
Of course.
Because, everybody loves that. But the scene where she goes in to speak with Adora and, they're doing the whole Buffy face sexual tension stuff until Adora mentions that Shadow Weaver is in Bright Moon. And then you see...
Yes.
Catra disassociate.
Yes.
And they do it with, the color, and they do it with, the focus on her eyes, and then they do it with beautifully with the sound design of it, where you get this complete washout, and then almost like a buzzing until we get to, Scorpia's voice kind of fading in slowly.
You can feel the shock of that revelation to her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like with Adora, for instance, I think most of fandom, there's absolutely a PTSD type of response.
Absolutely.
She's, I don't want to say flashbacks because that's not exactly what's happening in that scene, but with the disassociation, it's like, yeah, that's trauma. And with Catra, there have been people who said, look how crazy she is, as opposed to that. Yeah. And it's like, really? And it's like, well, how can it be racist if she's a cat person? And it's like, well...
These characters are representations of real people that we can relate to.
And also...
She's not really a cat girl from another planet called Etheria.
Yeah, and Shawn, I think you mentioned in a conversation that we were having kind of in one of our chats, and this is a conversation that I've had with other folks too, about kind of how in fantasy worlds, and I think you mentioned earlier today, how in fantasy worlds, people of color are, presented as, hybrid people, essentially, cat people or dog people or whatever. And that is kind of also part of the coding, and it's also within itself showing, and I'm trying to, Shawn, you said something really awesome, and I don't want to screw up what you said, but like you said it like.
Did I say that like today or in the chat?
It was in the chat like when we first started talking.
Oh dear. I was just thinking about this again this past week. I was super sick. I was fevery. I wanted something random in the background, and I was watching Star Trek. And I noticed for the first time, because I'm watching it as an adult, that the Klingons are all black people. And those are the aggressive, hostile, great warriors, easily offended, takes harsh action, sort of like without having full information. Like the second you're offended, I'm going to blow up your ship.
Yeah.
And there are no white Klingons. They are clearly, a very monochromatic race as a whole planet.
Right. But speaking of which, it's kind of interesting to note that in the Star Trek films, Klingon major characters were played by white actors. There was Christopher Lloyd in Star Trek 3, and what's his name? Christopher Plummer in, I think, the 6th one. Yes. They go real heavy on that bronzer.
Yeah. Oh, God.
They pick some white dudes to play them.
Yeah.
Too. So, Shawn, I found what you said, and it is very tied into what we've been saying, but it's kind of more of a like nose on the head with Catra, which is how does Catra's portrayal as a literal cat person connect to attitudes about women of color being more animalistic? And I feel like that flows from what we're talking about with understandings of women of color's experiences with trauma into this is like kind of the higher level thing of portrayal of somebody that is understood to be a woman of color as animalistic.
Yeah.
And when you think about, I mean, I could be wrong about this, and please tell me if you disagree. In broad strokes, when you think about the types of trauma that women of color are often subjected to, you don't have the luxury of choosing the flight response because there's nowhere to run to. If you don't stand your ground, you're going to die. It's all going to all be over,
Yeah.
So those are very obvious trauma responses in those environments specifically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like Catra's displays of aggression is interpreted as who she is. That is also extrapolated to how women of color are. That's where you get the angry black woman or like the spicy Latina, where you get like where these very human natural responses to extreme traumatizing circumstances.
Yeah.
It's then twisted around and made like it's almost like I think I'm on Twitter I asked something where it's like, does it seem to everybody else that white America does Darvo on black people? Which is like and it's a term. Darvo is an acronym. This term for if you know what gaslighting is, which is where people.
Yes, we do. We have discussed gaslighting.
We definitely do.
Doubt your own sanity, your own perception.
Yes.
Darvo is like a tactic that gaslighters use. And I think the first one is the D is deny. A for attack. RV reverse victim. O and offender. Yeah, so it's like deny that you're doing anything, then attack the other person, reverse who's doing what to who. Yeah, and then that becomes like it's a completely different narrative.
Yes.
Out of what actually happened.
Yes. Similar to when an abuser wants to, gaslight their abusee and, they just accuse you of what they are doing to you.
Yes. Yeah. And unfortunately, it tends to be very effective.
Yes.
Unless you specifically know what to do with it. But like... Yeah,
because it's a huge head game.
Yeah, it's a heck of a head game. And it's the same thing, like, not like just necessarily with these characters, but with, women of color writ large. It's like, and I see something similar to bring it back to Avatar. Go ahead, take your swig of soda. I'm just going to say, I'm going to relate things back to Avatar. And once upon a time, take that swig of soda.
We love Avatar. We talk about Avatar a lot too.
Take that swig of soda. I'm going to say, because this is something that happens with Azula a lot. People accuse her of doing things that Zuko did. And they say, therefore she's evil and crazy. Or they hold her responsible for things her father, Fire Lord Ozai, did. And Fire Lord Ozai is that complete monster, okay?
Right.
You don't burn your own kid's face for talking out of turn.
Yeah, right.
And, that's a clear thing right there. But then, fandom does the same thing with her, where it's like, yeah, they accuse her of doing the things her father does. Like, and she doesn't get an A.
Well, I mean, listen, Azula does plenty of bad stuff. We don't need to pretend that's not true.
Right.
But the question is, how is it framed compared to other characters, and what is extrapolated about who she is,
right,
versus other characters?
Yeah, and it's just like this whole situation where I'm like, well, I can go on the tangent for this for like a really long time, because I've clearly got a lot of pent up issues about this and fandom's reaction to her, and it's like, well, why do you feel sorry for her? Because she's a child soldier and she didn't have a choice in any of this.
Right.
But Zuko had a support system. Zuko was not systematically isolated from people.
Right.
So I guess now we're going to segue into race and queerness and representation.
Yes.
So again, Etheria is a very interesting setting in this regard, because Etheria, unlike virtually every society on Earth, is a queer normative society.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
There is absolutely no compulsory heterosexuality.
Yep.
There's barely any heterosexuality, let alone compulsory.
You could argue that there are no cishet characters on the show. You could actually make an argument for that. Yet,
you could. We discussed the possibility that King Micah might be the one straight guy, but even that, there's no evidence.
It's true. We just got that vibe.
We got the vibe. The anti-gaydar.
The anti-gaydar.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we see him at 12 or 10 or however young he is, and then grown up. So we don't know what happened in the intervening years.
True. That's why I said it's pure speculation.
Mm.
But yes, Etheria is a queer normative society.
And so something I was thinking about as I was doing that, well, how does race impact our understanding of queerness?
Right.
Right? Because then, you have to start thinking, like, so who shapes the norms of queerness?
Right.
Whose vocabulary do we use to identify ourselves and others?
Mm-hmm.
Who determines the aesthetics of queerness?
Mm-hmm.
Whose standards do we use to recognize queerness in ourselves and others? And the example I came up with was queer coding. And I'm like, well, whose code is that?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Who's not being seen when we're judging queerness by that standard? And like basically how our perceptions of queerness impacted by race. That's a general question that I want to throw out there.
Yeah.
And the other one I want to kind of sort of delve into is, how does race impact She-Ra's representation of queerness? Because in Etheria, it's like I wrote here, there are no labels in Etheria, not for sexuality, not for ethnicity or race.
Right.
And I said that it reminds me of white people who believe that racism is noticing or pointing out that people are different.
Right.
So they say things like, well, if we just get rid of all the labels,
right,
or we all become the same color.
Right.
And it's sort of like,
we're all really the same. The only problem is the lababels.
Right.
That if we didn't have labels, that the problems that we have would cease to be.
Right.
If we didn't notice anyone was different.
Right? Like if you took out the vocabulary of race, we wouldn't notice.
Right.
Yeah.
We wouldn't notice any of the cultural differences between us.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder how that, and it goes back to that first question is, why does Etheria feel so white? Mm-hmm. So I guess I just want to throw this question to both of you, and get you, both of you, thinking about what do you think is happening with that, about race and queerness, and who really shapes what queerness is.
It's a really broad question.
I know.
I feel like we need some sort of tangible starting place.
All right, something that you bring up a lot on the show, the bisexual lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Who made that decision that was bisexual lighting?
Whoever made all the flags. I don't know who made the flags.
Right. So that's what I mean. It's like, who did that? And
well, I mean, are the various rainbow flags that have now become like, there's a specific one for each little queer niche. Every category has its own flag. Are those less recognized in some communities than others? Because I don't even know the answer to that.
Well, I think that with those are more niche, and I hate saying, let's expand it a little bit more, but I'm saying it's like just the very act of describing those niches in those terms.
Right. Just having that question.
Like who decides, like, for instance, because it was something I was thinking about when I was thinking about like how I relate to my gender, and the vocabulary we have doesn't describe me. The vocabulary of cis and trans doesn't describe me. Neither does non-binary. Because my gender identity is it's this, I mean, yes, I'm a woman and I'm assigned female at birth and I identify as a woman strongly so, and I resent it when people call me Mr. So-and-so. But the feelings that I have and the way I relate to that is not the way I'm told it's supposed to be. And I'm not talking about like the broader world with the cisgender straight people. It's not even that. Even within the queer community, it's like, okay, these are the labels that you can choose from. And I'm like, these don't fit me. And, you know, for instance, and I look at like the queer Native American people, and it's like they have their, like, not all of them, of course, but the broader umbrella term is Two-Spirit.
Right.
And that is reflective, not just of gender or sexuality, but it also reflects, you know, race and ethnicity and that grounding in that cultural milieu. The terms of currently available to me are, you know, I don't have anything like that. And it's like, I say lesbian, but that comes with its own expectations too.
Right. And a lot of those expectations have baked in understandings of race, of class, of the sociological situation where the word lesbian was kind of cooked and constructed, and how that within itself was kind of baked into, like the word lesbian was developed in Europe.
It's a white word.
It's a white word.
It comes from Greece, from the Isle of Lesbos.
Yeah, and using it comes from European understandings of sexuality. Like sexologists codified sexuality, which within itself, codifying these things is also comes from like the way that it is codified comes from the very European codification practices that were happening during the Victorian era. So like it all is kind of baked in with this sort of like whiteness.
Yeah.
And then it goes to that, and I hate to air dirty laundry here, it goes to that really weird, messed up place that sometimes happens in some communities of color. I'm making this very clear. Not all, not most, some, where queerness is seen as a white thing.
Yes.
Right. I have seen that. It's certainly not universal, but I have seen it.
I've experienced it, having a partner that was Black and having them be like, why are you, you know, it was two things. One, it was like, that gay shit is white shit, and why are you dating a white girl? So it was it was two things, and one was indicative of the other, right? Well, of course you're going to do that white shit, which is gay shit. So of course you're going to date a white girl. Yeah.
Never mind, like, the very long, rich history of Black queerness.
Yeah, like, and also just like the like historical, like, both the like the very complicated history of Black queerness in America and Black-white queer culture as appropriative of Black queer culture, and Black queer culture being understood as an outsider culture where, you know, white outsiders were able to go into, but Blacks were not able to enter into, you know, non-white outsider white non-outsider communities, like, and all of that shit. Even going right now to, like, you know, to drag terms that come from ball culture, which comes from
ball culture.
Yes,
I don't know what that means.
It's like the people.
Oh, you mean like a ball is in like a costume ball, like a fete, a giant party.
Yes. A party. Yes.
Yeah, the film Paris is Burning, which is also problematic, shows this particular culture of ball culture, which are it is a culture of primarily, I believe it, you know. I'll speak from the text Paris is Burning, because this is a text that I can speak on of it. Paris is Burning is a documentary that was made in the late 80s about ball culture in Harlem. It is specifically a culture of, in this I believe is Black and Latino queer youth, and a lot of it is centered around drag and drag performance and gender performance, and a lot of things that we, you know, that are kind of have been kind of assimilated into white drag spaces and white gay spaces and gay male spaces come directly from that culture. Like read, you know, comes from, you know, Black queer culture, like the, you know, reading someone to filth, or
what do you mean read? I don't even know what that means in this context.
Sure. So
a very thorough dressing down.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like, okay, so I'm gonna read you, and then they're gonna.
Oh, okay.
Right. Even like
read shade.
Yeah, shade. Like
throwing shade.
Like pretty much just like anything.
I've definitely noticed that. Even though, like, honestly, I don't follow drag closely, as you're saying these things, I'm like, yes, this is very indicative of drag culture. And when I have watched white drag groups and communities enacting these things, I have definitely thought to myself before that this was appropriation of Black culture.
Well, I mean, even
passing, it's noticeable.
I mean, who doesn't, like, yes, queen,
Of course. I mean, listen, it's America. We all borrow from each other's cultures. It's impossible not to. But it's a question of credit.
Well, it's a question of credit, and it's a question of who gets to borrow from whose culture, and then who, what is cultural exchange versus borrowing. And I mean, right. it's a confluence of all sorts of factors that really need to be examined with who has the power.
Of course.
And, who has the power and where does the power come from? So.
Yeah. And bringing it back to Etheria, this is still kind of a broad statement, but one of the things that I sort of noticed and that I think is fairly obvious is that, again, like you have a room of white, mostly queer writers, mostly female-coded queer writers, and clearly, who want to be diverse, but this is a group of people whose point of view all centers from the same cultural base. And so when they create a queer world in Etheria, they're creating a queer white world in the same sense that if you're reading movie descriptions and you read one that says, a lesbian couple in Idaho in the 1920s has this whatever story, you imagine that they're going to be white, and they probably are going to be. If they're not going to be white, it would have said a Black lesbian couple or a Latina lesbian couple because whiteness is just invisible.
Right.
And it's accepted, it's assumed, unless proven otherwise.
That also speaks to, like, so you're defining it as a lesbian couple, whereas if it was a heterosexual couple, it would be a couple in Idaho in the 1920s. So.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of something. I don't know if you've checked out this Netflix series called Q-Force.
I watched it.
I did not watch it yet. I heard mixed reviews from folk, though.
I'll let Jenny give her impression, then I follow up with my impression, and then we tie it back to the theme
I
of this
definitely want to hear. Yeah.
I didn't really have strong feelings about it, honestly. I could see what they were trying to do. I don't know whether they fully achieved it. I don't know. Obviously, there were some very large joking stereotypes, but that's the kind of show it is. It's a cartoon. It's an adult cartoon that's meant to be ridiculous.
Right. Well, for our listeners, Q-Force is a Netflix adult cartoon about a team of queer spies. Like take all those spy tropes and make everybody queer. So you have the
Wanda
hacker.
Sykes' character with her life with her wife Pam and all their friends.
Yeah.
That was funny and somewhat relatable.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't want to discourage anyone from watching it because raw representation and all, as well as, sometimes you look at things that you're not crazy about just to kind of get a lay of the land, is like just to have a sense of what's out there. And I read it and it's like, not read it, I watched it and I was like, I can tell that everybody working behind the scenes is a cis gay white dude. From the nature of the jokes to the things I'm expected to find relatable. And I'm like, and even like some of the stuff with Deb, like there was a joke that was made. I remember one joke that kind of made me sigh and roll my eyes, where it was like Deb tells the main character, what's his name, Steve Merriweather, that he wouldn't last 5 minutes. Like, you should try being a Black woman. And he's like, oh, I'd love to. And I'm like,
yeah.
My reaction would not be appropriate for this podcast. So
you can say what's on your mind.
Okay.
Yeah, please do.
This is unfiltered. Please speak your mind. That's why you're here.
I said, fuck you, dude. I mean, fuck you, dude. It was just so, because it reminded me of that thing where there was this article that went around and made me roll my eyes. It's like, oh, please shut the entire fuck up. Where like there's cis gay white dude was like, find your inner Black woman or some shit. And I'm like,
fuck you.
Yeah.
You find your inner Black woman. Why don't you listen to a real Black woman to understand what that even fucking means?
Yeah, it's like, what, do you think it's a party all the time for Black women here? It's like,
Yeah, those are the kinds of jokes that people make about groups that they are really reaching outside of their own experience.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that they're doing it. And in fact, this is maybe a tiny bit of opening a can of worms, but I'm not going to open it all the way. Pivoting over to Dave Chappelle. I did not watch The Closer. I saw a few clips from it during the controversy, and based on those clips, I was like, I'm not going to like this. Fuck this, so why should I watch it? And that was the end of it for me. I'm not delving into any deeper than that. But years ago, there have been other times when he, in passing, has poked fun at trans people in ways that made it very clear that he doesn't know any trans people. He's not part of the queer community. And he made a joke once, and again, this was years ago, about something to the effect of, you know, Black men in New York would actually be safer if they were trans because women don't get beat up as much as Black men. And I was like, fuck you, dude. Nobody is less safe.
Yeah. Also,
nobody is less safe than Black trans women. And you would know that if you were actually part of this community that you're making fun of, but you're not. So it's not the kind of poking fun that's based on familiarity. And, you know, the it's funny because it's true thing doesn't apply when you're talking about shit that you actually don't understand. And it's very clear that you don't understand.
Yeah.
I do want to do a quick fact check. While all of the showrunners, all the executive producers, and all of the head writers of Q-Force are white, 2 credits to both Ira Madison III, who is incredible. Ira Madison is incredible, and Liza Dye are both respectively identify as a male and a woman, a man and a woman, and they are both Black writers.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, and Ira Madison III is also a queer Black writer.
Yes, they're both queer Black writers.
That we know from other contexts. Okay,
yeah.
I don't know that woman.
Yeah. So I just wanted to drop in what does that mean? That, you know, at the end of the day, whoever gets filtered through, because every single episode always gets filtered through a showrunner, and it's always who's in charge of that, right? So while we do have two Black writers on the staff writing these things, writing 2 specific episodes, that doesn't mean that those jokes aren't coming from everybody else in the writer's room, all of the people, you know, that are the showrunners, you know, like everybody else.
That kind of tokenism doesn't necessarily affect real change.
Exactly. But I did want to drop in a quick fact check on that, because I did remember Ira Madison talking about it, and I did remember Liza Dye talking about it too. So
yes, I remember Ira Madison talking about it. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. To bring it back to She-Ra and Etheria. Okay, so we have this queer normative society based on, the white experience of queer.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, something I was saying earlier about Etheria's monoculture and some of the implications of that, where, you know, and I think, and I'm not saying they're sending this message deliberately.
Right.
I'm just making it very clear. They try, but they don't quite have the range. But so what it comes off as, where all these differences are merely cosmetic,
right,
is that, you know, the message tends to be, we can get along as long as the way you're different doesn't mean anything.
Right. That is so well put.
Or we can live in peace as long as you're normal. And by normal, I mean as much like me as possible. And I'm not saying that that's what Noelle Stevenson set out to do. I don't think that at all. It's just one of those things where, like, this is where the fact you don't have other people who are different in a meaningful way in that writing, you know, in that creative team.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Agreed.
So yeah, but then I kind of want to do like a fantasy thing where it's like, okay, now imagine if they did make those differences matter. You know, like, okay, you have, for instance, Mermista. She lives in a seaport, basically, or
she lives in a sea kingdom.
Yeah.
Yes. Her
kingdom literally has like starfish and squid and stuff. And I love Mermista to pieces because, you know, she's a 3-dimensional character. She's got personality. We like this.
Fuck yeah, she does.
We want this. Okay. But at the same time, it's like, okay, but what if we actually push further with that? Like, how does living in that environment shape the culture?
Of course.
And, you know, do they even speak English among themselves? You know, and how would they, it's like, at least in Star Wars, you have this thing called BASIC, which is the lingua franca of the Star Wars universe.
Right.
It's American English, but it's like BASIC. That's what they call it, I think. And it's understood that this is just a language people use to communicate across difference.
Yeah, it's like D&D. It's
not
common. Yeah,
it's common. It's not. It'd be interesting if I said, you know, there are certain words and concepts that just doesn't exist in common because it's directed as a trade language. So there.
I want to talk about D&D languages with you too, because that sounds awesome.
So deep speech.
Yeah, let's do it. No.
Another topic that I have nothing to say about.
Yeah, we could talk about that.
Yeah, all the elves speak Elvish, all the dwarves speak Dwarvish. Yep.
That's reasonable. It makes sense. But also, I think there's a certain point at which we have to let it off the hook because of the fact that this is a 22-minute TVY7 cartoon. They don't have time to do that level of world building necessarily.
So I do want to speak to one thing here in that we do see one main character or one major character in a theory that does not speak English, and that's Rogelio.
That's right. He's the only one.
He is the only one that
does
he
just not speak, period?
Common Ethereum. No, he speaks, I mean...
he speaks lizard squealy language.
Lizard, but like, you know,
and Kyle, they all act like they understand him, and they talk back to him in English.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that within itself is also A, a trope, B, a problematic trope that, happens specifically within fantasies, and C, I just love Rogelio, so I just want to say, C, I love Rogelio.
You're right. He's the only one who is marked as different in any meaningful way. And he is less humanoid than all the others. But one thing that I was going to say, just based on like what we're trying to get out here, is that I think very much it's the case of Etheria reflects, I think, a white creative team's, best ability to create like a post-racist society, utopian society, where it's like, we have the goal that we want our society to be totally non-racist and everyone to be on equal footing, but we are all white in this room trying to think about it. And so the world that we can imagine is a very white fantasy version of that, multicultural utopia. Like there was a movie on Netflix, I think in the last year, called Moxie. Did you guys see that?
No.
It's a high school where, of course it's a white teenage girl who starts this awesome feminist group where there's supposed to be
yes, I did see that.
Yeah, there's supposed to be no leadership. It's a group for everyone, but she's in charge because she keeps her identity secret, and only her secret identity person is the one who says how things are going to be. And so that could go really badly. But she manages to get, like, all of her BIPOC allies and all of her queer allies and everyone who is different just jumps on board without making a fuss. And they're like, yes, this is all of our group and we're all into it. But she, the white protagonist is still calling all the shots. Basically.
And she's also, spoiler alert, she's not the one that gets in trouble for it when they inevitably get caught, right? It's the woman of color, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So even though it's this great, in theory, the idea of it is like, oh, look how great things could be if we all collaborated across differences to make this awesome feminist group. It's like, yeah, but there's no challenge to white hierarchical leadership in reality going on in this narrative.
She does kind of have like an Adora thing going on too, right? Like,
yeah, for sure. Except that, she's very timid, and that's the original reason that she does everything from her secret identity, because it's the only way she can feel empowered is by not letting people know that it's really her.
Yep. It's got a good soundtrack, though.
Yes. Okay, since there's so much more material here than we could possibly cover in one sitting, there isn't necessarily a great stopping place, but I think this is as good as any for now. And we will certainly have a lot more to say in the future. And one parting thought that I had as we're getting ready to say goodbye is that I want to make sure people understand that we're not necessarily just ragging on SPOP and saying, oh, these are all the ways in which it failed. These are all the ways in which it's bad. But every cultural text exists in a cultural context, and it's almost impossible to have nothing be problematic, and that's okay.
Yep.
I think all the texts and shows and movies and fandoms that we love, they all have problematic aspects, and the way we examine them and understand them and allow those discussions to play out is the most important part of that. That's how we learn and grow. It's not about cancel culture, which I think has become more of a black and white thing.
I guess if I had parting thoughts, it's like, yeah, it's not really listeners, I don't waste my time on things I don't like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's legit.
I dig into these things because because it's often hard to start these conversations in fandom. There's a lot of resistance to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Especially to people of color saying, hey, this is how my experience of the world shapes the way I experience this piece of media.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that could be like tough for, I guess, white people to hear or understand or make space for. Because after that, it immediately launches into a defense of the thing. And it's not about defending the thing necessarily. It's not even about accusing the thing of being bad. It's just, I know people say this all the time. It is what it is. But like,
yeah,
that's the context it comes from. Understanding that context and being kind of mindful about it, not critical necessarily, but mindful.
Exactly.
Is, to me, a more mature way of engaging with the media you're with. Is like it's being a passive consumer. Where's the fun in that? Where's the learning and the growing happening if you're just passively consuming it and not asking questions and not digging deeper and not saying, just admitting that the people who wrote this were, people. So they have,
yes,
we're all human.
Yeah, they're all human, and so they have they're finite. Yeah, they're finite and they're flawed. So it's like, and that shows up in the work, and it's okay to acknowledge that. You don't have to do the thing I saw on Tumblr like a month or two. There were white people adamantly defending H.P. Lovecraft. Why?
Sorry.
Oh, you would believe that the way they framed it was that it wasn't racist or anti-Semitic for him to say those things about Black people and Jews because he was mentally ill and afraid of everything different.
Every single part of his work is xenophobic. Of course he's racist and anti-Semitic.
The way they kind of portrayed racism and anti-Semitism as a symptom of mental illness.
Oh God, yes. And that is that's so something that comes in common in conversations about these things, right? Is that it's a personal ownness of being crazy. He's just crazy. He's racist because he's crazy, right?
Yeah, no. No.
But I think one of the most important points of what you're saying isn't just that what these people were saying and how they justified it, but the fact that they felt so compelled to defend something because there was a racial critique. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, we often use the word critique in the academic sense.
Yes.
Being critical doesn't just mean being negative. Yes. That's the common usage. But the academic usage of the word critical means you're doing a critical investigation, meaning, you're looking into these things and examining them more deeply. That's all it means in an academic sense.
And let's be frank, H.P. Lovecraft was legitimately terrible. A terrible person. He was horrible to his wife. And she ditched him because of it. And this is in a time when being a divorcee still kind of had a stigma, And so and of course how can he be anti-Semitic when his wife was Jewish? And it's just,
oh my God,
and it's all that stuff. And it's listen, and here's the thing with the H.P. Lovecraft and the way that his works have been reclaimed and transformed. You have people of color who like the concepts he played with, not so much the execution. And so what did they do? They just, they took what worked and left what didn't. And
it's the best way to move forward.
And it's these are people of color. These are people H.P. Lovecraft would have hated. Hated.
That's probably part of what makes it fun to do it. Be like, fuck this guy.
Yeah, and it's I hesitate to say the real fans. I don't like doing that, but it's the people who really engage with his work and say, you know what? Yeah, he was hella racist, hella anti-Semitic. Wow, he was a misogynist and homophobic. And every kind of bigotry, he probably hit every one of them. But then they say, but you know what? I like this idea of cosmic horror. And I can use this and leave that stuff in the dustbin where it belongs. you leave all the racism and the bigotry in the dustbin where it belongs. She-Ra leaps and bounds better than H.P. Lovecraft. Okay?
Fucking hope so. Yes. Yeah, we all love She-Ra. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we have a totally blank, uncritical response to every single aspect.
And it's okay to be critical. It's okay. Well, if I'm going to, it's like there's somebody probably listening right now or somebody who watched the show who wants to do something similar. And it's like, okay, how can I do that, but better? I'm telling you.
But better, exactly.
This is how you do it. You listen to stuff like this.
Yes.
There.
It's almost like we're doing the work of cultural evolution. Or at least we're engaging in it. I don't want to be so egocentric as to say, well, we're doing it. Haha. Like, we're engaging. We're giving it our best shot.
It's like,
I'll say that we're changing the world with our podcast. I'll go out and do it. I'll say it.
Fuck yeah. Well, we definitely are doing that.
Sure.
With the power of queer joy and queer revolution.
Yes, exactly.
Heck, I mean, maybe in a future one, I'll be like, okay, stuff I'm glad is not in Etheria as a person of color. I'm like, I don't have to look at trauma porn in Etheria. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm happy I don't have to see anybody who looks like me getting whipped, sold, or abused.
Yeah.
Yes.
As a matter of course.
Absolutely. It's certainly not like we're not saying they got everything wrong.
They didn't.
It's just a starting point to increase, and especially I feel like, and this is me just speaking as a white person, I feel like most of the best and most meaningful growth I've had as a queer person on the path to living an anti-racist life is situations in which I have had to become aware that I was immersed in a white bubble and that my white POV was invisibilized as being a POV of any kind. Having that universality be questioned and have that veil drawn back and be like, oh, this isn't a universal experience. My point of view isn't the universal point of view. There's people of other cultures who are seeing this from different points of view, and it's going to affect them and impact them differently.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's important.
Okay, now I'm ready to, now I'm wrapping up.
Now you're wrapping
Hey.
up. Awesome. All right, so damn, that was fucking awesome, Shawn.
Yes, it was.
Shawn, you rule.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you. Please come back and fucking geek out with us anytime.
Yes. I'll send the character sheets.
Yeah, I think Meff's gonna start cyber stalking me.
I
possibly.
really super am. I'm gonna be like, yo, can we talk about more cartoons? Can we talk about D&D? Can we talk about Lovecraft Country? Let's do it.
Oh, do not get me started on LCC.
I do. I am very interested in that because I have feelings too.
I have some things to send you.
I would love to read them, and I'll send you more fanfic too. So.
Word.
We were just sending shit back and forth. Shawn, where can our listeners find you on the internets?
When I'm not hiding on my internet bunker called Tumblr, you can find me on Twitter at Project Tzimtzum.
Which only Jewish people know how to spell.
Yes, I will tell you how to spell it. At Project Tzimtzum. It's at PROJECTTZIMTZUM. There.
Word.
So I think, that's where you can find me. Probably find some of my stuff floating around on the internet ether. I don't have a website for Project Tzimtzum yet. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, folks, if you liked what you heard and you want to join us in discussion, you can like and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcast fix. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at HeyAdoraCast, or you can email us at heyadoracast@gmail.com. We have a Patreon!
Fuck yeah, we do!
Fuck yeah, we do! Become a member of the Rebellion and get fantastic perks like bonus episodes, your very own private Facebook group, and Discord server. That's right, we started a Discord server.
We heard you.
Yeah, we heard you. Exclusive playlist, patron-only Zoom hangouts, and so much more. You can find the link to our Patreon, as well as all of our socials and playlists, in our show notes or at heyadora.gay. That's right.
.gay.
And remember, queer joy is radical.
And queer love saves the universe.